Road tripping is an undeniably iconic cultural phenomenon in the United States, Canada, and I'm sure many other parts of the world as well. Whether driving non-stop for the better part of a day appeals to you or not, the fast-changing scenery, stops at quirky roadside attractions, and uncomfortable proximity to your travel companions give road trips a special place in families, movies, and bucket lists. But for serious adventure seekers, one road trip stands out above the rest: driving the Dempster Highway through the Canadian Arctic. The Dempster Highway is Canada's only road that extends beyond the Arctic Circle, and aside from cutting through the literal wild Arctic, the highway is unique for being completely unpaved and almost entirely devoid of gas stations, settlements, phone service, and fellow travelers. At the same time, though, this road cuts through one of the few truly untouched wildernesses left on Earth, and offers an unparalleled adventure surrounded by incredible natural beauty. We're going to jump right in and take a look at where this road takes you, why it was built in the first place, and what it's like to travel on. The Dempster Highway is approximately 456 miles long and starts just east of Dawson City, Yukon Territory, where it breaks off from the Klondike Highway. Despite crossing land that's subject to some of the most extreme weather on Earth, the highway is open year-round, although travelers needing to use the highway during the winter must be prepared for 24-hour darkness, unpredictable weather, and treacherous snow and ice. After driving on the Dempster Highway for about 250 miles, you cross the Arctic Circle, and there's a nice little sign that commemorates that. I guess even this road trip would be incomplete without a quirky roadside attraction. As you continue onwards, you cross into the Northwest Territories and must cross the Peel and Mackenzie rivers on a ferry. The ferries are free and run from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. between May and November. In the winter, though, the ferries generally run as needed, and unsurprisingly, ice can cause the ferry services to close with little to no notice. But once you make it past the river, past the tree line and into the tundra, you'll eventually have driven the length of the Dempster Highway to end up in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, where you can get a certificate of completion for driving the length of the highway. I think the fact that this certificate exists really speaks to the accomplishment that driving the length of this highway is. The concept of driving through the Arctic is trepidatious itself, but the reality of doing it is a whole different thing. I mean, if you or your travel companion has a medical emergency, there's no way to contact emergency services unless you have a satellite phone. If your car breaks down, you run out of gas or you get a flat tire, you better have the supplies and know how to fix it yourself because no one is coming to get you. Add in the extreme weather and dangerous wild animals that you can encounter on the highway, and you can really see why they give you a certificate if you get to the end of this thing. That said, driving the length of the Dempster Highway is definitely something I hope to accomplish in my lifetime. Anyway, now that we know what this highway is all about, let's look at when, how, and why it was built. The highway's story began in 1958 when the Canadian government made the decision to build a road from Dawson City to Inuvik. At the time, the town of Inuvik was still under construction, and because oil and gas prospecting was rampant in the Mackenzie River Delta, the government hoped to build an oil pipeline that would be parallel to this new road. The following year, oil was discovered in the Yukon Territory's Eagle Plain, which exacerbated the need for a road to get drilling machinery up and the revenue down. Construction on the road began in Dawson City in January of 1959, but disputes between the federal and local governments stalled construction, ultimately leading to a pause in construction in 1961, with only 72 miles of the highway completed. The pause continued until 1968, when Americans discovered oil in Alaska's Prudhoe Bay. Knowing that the Americans were racing to build their own presence in the Western Arctic gave the Canadians an incentive to assert their own presence in the region, and thus construction on the road resumed. On August 18, 1979, a crowd of about 200 people gathered in Dawson City to celebrate the completion of the Dempster Highway. So, all that to say, the demand for oil production drove the inception and completion of the highway. Since the highway was really the first of its kind, a lot of consideration went into where and how it should be laid down. During the road's construction, environmentalists raised significant concerns about the impact that the road would have on the area's porcupine caribou population. And rightly so, since about 70,000 of these caribou migrate through the land bisected by the Dempster Highway each fall. Furthermore, these caribou populations needed to be protected because they were an important resource for the indigenous peoples of the region. Luckily, once various First Nation tribes and other environmental groups put increasing pressure on the government to take steps to protect the environment while developing this road, the Yukon Territorial Government imposed the first ever hunting ban along the highway in 1977, and people accepted that the highway itself was not a threat to the caribou. The highway also required special engineering consideration because most of the land that the road was to pass through is covered in permafrost. Permafrost, which is basically soil frozen year-round, would melt and sink if a traditional road was built on top of it. So as a solution, the Dempster Highway was built on top of a 4 to 8 foot thick gravel pad, which insulates the permafrost and makes it safe to sustain a road. Personally, I think it's fascinating to learn about how engineers found a solution to building a road on permafrost. I mean, I've never been to the Arctic, and I know next to nothing about permafrost beyond its dictionary definition, and probably a lot of the policymakers who decided to build the highway in the first place hadn't interacted a lot with permafrost either. I'm just really intrigued that if you just build a normal road on permafrost, it would eventually sink. Anyway, that's beside the point. The Dempster Highway is the result of a collaboration between the government, oil prospectors, First Nations, and environmentalists, and I'm really happy that all of these groups were able to work together such that this road could be built in such a way that it furthered the diverse objectives of all these groups. Next, I want to take us into a closer look at what traveling on the Dempster Highway is like, and hear from individuals who've actually made the trip themselves. If you're properly prepared, driving the length of the Dempster Highway is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Of course, a healthy respect for the Arctic is probably the first step in making sure you're prepared for the journey, but in terms of practical preparation, most guides recommend bringing at least 2 spare tires, extra water and gas, a 4-wheel drive vehicle, emergency supplies, and a satellite phone. Although under perfect conditions, the drive can take as little as 12 hours, if anything goes wrong, even something as non-threatening as a rainstorm can cause significant delays. As a result, guides also recommend planning for at least 2 days to complete the drive, and generally planning for more time than you'll think you'll need. Another important thing to take into consideration is that since the entire 456 miles of the road is unpaved, consisting of shale gravel instead of concrete, the possibility of getting 1 or more flat tires is extremely real, hence the recommendation to bring 2 spare tires. I read a Lonely Planet article written by Anna Kaminsky where she chronicles her experience traveling the length of the Dempster Highway. She illustrates the beauty of the drive, describing how it's wondrous to watch the changes in the landscape beyond the Arctic Circle. Dense spruce forest gives way to dwarf trees, and then the land opens up, suddenly and dramatically, with rolling tundra stretching to the horizon and bare, snow-tipped hills soaring to the one side. Then fog descends without warning, and for a short while I can barely see a few meters in front of me and slow down to a crawl. Out here, you're very much at the mercy of the elements. So few people get to see these remarkable, unique features of this harsh northern landscape up close. I'm truly one of the lucky ones. While this makes the drive sound dreamy and idyllic, in her article she also describes nearly sliding off the road after a rainstorm, waiting overnight for the ferry to resume running after rain raised the river's water level, and driving 25 kilometers with a flat tire just to reach a mechanic. Overall, I think Kaminsky does a great job in communicating the beauty of her travel on the Dempster, while also conveying the reality of traversing such a harsh, remote terrain. As of November 2017, an extension was added to the Dempster Highway which reaches 86 miles from Inuvik all the way to the edge of the Arctic Ocean in Tuktoyaktuk, or Tuk. This extension of the road is the first ever land connection to Tuk from anywhere, which has both excited its residents about the possibility of tourists and cheaper supplies, but also concerned some about the opportunity for an influx of crime or other vices. Since I've never been to Tuk, nor do I know anyone who is from there or has ever gone there, I don't really have an opinion about whether the road has had a positive or negative impact on the settlement, but I do think that it's an interesting thing to think about. It's so unusual for a town to have no roads coming in or out of it to begin with, so residents of a town in this position can speak to an exceptionally unique point of view. But for better or worse, since 2017, there's a way to drive all the way to Canada's Arctic coast. With all that said, you can probably tell how fascinated I am with this road, and I hope you all enjoyed learning about this too. The Dempster Highway is truly one of a kind, and it offers an opportunity for the adventure of a lifetime, so long as you take the proper safety precautions. So maybe the next time you're hours into a drive, you'll be a little bit more appreciative of the little things like being able to weather a thunderstorm in a creepy cafe in the middle of nowhere, or being able to load a map on your phone when you've pulled over and realized you missed your exit 10 minutes ago. Would you ever drive the Dempster? Let me know down in the comments.